Good afternoon, dear participants. Let me welcome all those who have joined our today's event. I'm happy to welcome the guests, the speakers, and all those who are listening to us on Facebook or on some other channels of broadcast. I'm Maria Rybko. I'm Deputy Director of the Center for Economic Strategy. And the topic of our today's monthly economic webinar is how to increase lending for business. Today, the event will be moderated by me, and it is funded under the Great Britain's international program, UK International Development. There is the disclaimer that the opinions claimed here do not necessarily reflect its opinion. And let me also give a couple of technical things. All comments and all questions to our experts and to our panelists can be left in the Q&A session or in the chat, and our colleagues will definitely send those questions to me, or I will look through them myself, and you will be able to get the answer to your questions today. What about the structure? What about the agenda of our today's discussion? So, for those who are our regular guests, it's no news. But for those who have joined us for the first time, let me tell that today we have a monthly economic review, and my colleagues from the Center for Economic Strategy will tell us what has happened over the recent months and what trends we can see, what opportunities, threats are there, what is happening in Ukraine, and all those things related to the global events. And we will present our today's topic, which is lending for today. And after the presentations delivered by my colleagues, we will invite three of our today's guests. This is Andriy Talupa, advisor to the Minister for Economy, Environment and Agriculture of Ukraine. Natalia Budkova-Vitvitska, member of the management board of Oshchad Bank, who is responsible for SMEs. And also we have the representative of the National Bank of Ukraine with us, this Pervina Dadashova, who is the director of the Department for Financial Stability of the National Bank of Ukraine. I'm very happy to welcome all of our guests. I'm happy to have this great team that is going to soon present the economic review of what is happening in Ukraine. And I think that we may go over to presentations. So let me see whether um, it's there. So academic review will be started by Natalia today. So over to you, Natalia. Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon to everyone. Please, next slide. Next slide, please. Well, sorry, something has happened to the presentation, so wait a second, technical issues. So Natalia Kolesnichenko will present the sectoral part, and then Oksana Mironenko will tell us more about the fiscal sector, and the third speaker will speak about the monetary policy and will also speak on our special topic of today, which is lending. I can see that the slide is already on the screen, so you're very much welcome, Natalia. Thank you. So, what has happened over the recent 2 weeks as compared to February? The energy situation improved in March very considerably, and according to the estimates of the Ministry of Energy, the deficit in peak hours is now about 1 gigawatt, which is amounting to about 3 or 5% of the spring demand. There are more sunny days. The solar generation is already there. It's working, and some repairs of the lost capacities and destroyed capacities have taken place. And this has led to the situation when, in the first part of March, first half of March, almost throughout the country, we haven't had any major blackouts, or there have been only some periods of disconnecting from the grid. Definitely, the situation with energy is still difficult, but we can all see that we don't have that many blackouts as before. Over this period, as compared to January and February attacks. Nearly 3.5 gigawatts of capacity have been restored, and this refers both to hidden power plants, thermal power plants, and hydroelectric power plants. And this also refers to the heating systems. Though for some of them we have seen new destructions, new attacks. However, this process is going on, in particular with the support of the international partners, which have provided the funding and which have also provided the opportunities for uh, re- getting some spare parts or transformers. According to the ministry, by the end of March, we still expect to have about 2 gigawatt of capacity to be repaired. This does not mean that there will be no blackouts at all. We cannot hope for that in the nearest future because in parallel, there will be nuclear power plants taken for repairs, which means that we will try to strike the right balance between the losses and the things that have been repaired. And this is also testified to by the fact that we still keep importing energy, in spite of the fact that the peak of imports came in February. But even in March, in some sunny days, we have done some export of electricity, which shows that the resilience of our energy system is coming back. The Ministry of Energy expects to add at least 1.5 gigawatts of interconnection capacity with the EU over the next 2 years. So now this amounts to about 2.5, and this is together with Moldova. But at the same time, we can see that the fuel market and gas market have some problems because of the war in Iran and because of the block of the Hormuz trade. That's why throughout the world we have higher fuel prices, and this also refers to Ukraine. The diesel fuel prices are getting higher at an extreme pace because this is the type of price of fuel that is used by the army and by agricultural machinery. Therefore, we can see some risks of further growth of prices because of the uncertainty. And we may also expect the deficit of fuel in the market, though all our supplies are well established, so we may hope for the better. Next slide, please. However, this difficult situation at the beginning of the year, with problems with electricity supply in January and February, has heavily affected the industrial sector. In particular, we can see that metallurgical production fell by 10% in February as compared to the same period of the previous year.
З лютим попереднього року. І
And the key
основні
factor
причини
here
не лише
was not just
відсутність
a
електроенергії
deficit of
чи витратити
electricity,
енергії, але
but
також
that was also accounted
недостатнє
for by the introduction of the
ремонтні
CBAM
запаси,
mechanism
які
that we discussed
нами
at
з
our
вами
previous
давно
monthly
маємо.
meeting.
Водночас
At the
у
same
ЄС
time, the government
запровадив
has
право для залізничних
allocated
перевезень
has
України
actually
і виділив на
allocated
це
16,000
4,4
billion
мільярди
hryvnias
гривень.
to
До кінця
Ukrainian
2024
railways,
року
Ukrzaliznytsia,
це
because
дасть
it wants to
фінансову
improve
підтримку
the
залізниці і
financial
зменшить
condition of
стабільність
the railway
у
station, and it will put an
регулювання
end to cross
пасажирських
subsidization
перевезень
from
за
freight.
рахунок вантажних, що загалом
And
оцінюється
this is also caused by
втратами
the
на
introduction of
5,5
PSO
мільярдів.
for the railway transport.
Як товарна
So
флота
we, in
сказала
general,
похідна
assess this
кампанія
situation as
стартувала.
the
Наразі
one in positive
уряд дуже
dynamics.
задоволений,
The sowing
оскільки
season has begun in 9
розраховуємо
regions as of March the
посівний
16th. We
урожай
expect that the planted
4,5
area in
гектарів
2026
за
will
оцінками
be
Міністерства
almost the same as
аграрії.
in 2025,
Також
according to the
враховуючи
Ministry of
зміни,
Economy.
оцінюється
And
плани уряду,
winter crops are in good condition,
втрати не
with
перевищать
losses not expected to
3-5%,
exceed
хоча, звичайно,
from 3 to
можливі певні
5%.
нюанси,
Though, of
однак
course,
не
they are
динамічні за
not
рівнем
uniform in
регіонів.
terms of the regional
Є
breakdown, because there are
прогнозовані
some areas
цифри,
closer
де
to the south
обговорювалася видана оцінка, і,
where
можливо,
the losses
втрати
will
будуть
be a little bit
вищі.
higher.
Очікується, що
We may also
подвійні будуть
expect that
корекційні
the lost
санкції
winter
знижки
crops will
по
be
всьому
resown,
основному
mainly I'm
споживчому
talking about
регіону.
corn and sunflower. They will
А
be
по
replanted, and the
сої вирощування
soybean
буде
area will
зменшитися
decline
через,
this year, in particular
зокрема, через те, що
due to the
змінилася, як кажуть,
export
аграрії
duty
продовольчі
introduced
продукти,
last
через
year because of the
запровадження
changes of the
мит
economy of
на
this
експорт
product.
соєвих бобів,
So,
яке
as you know,
також відбулося
this
в
happened
минулому році.
last year.
Також
This export duty
наразі
was
очікується,
introduced, and
що
we also expect that there
пального
will be
аграріям вистачить,
enough fuel
і
for
завдяки
farmers
тим
thanks to the
резервам, які
accumulated
акумульовані
reserves
були
that were
в
accumulated before
кампанії
the sowing
раніше.
season.
Наступне,
And
стать, будь
next
ласка.
slide, please.
Крім
Besides
електроенергії, крім того,
electricity and
що тривають
besides
воєнні дії, що
hostilities,
ще
what are the other
стримує
curbing
воєнну
factors for
підприємство?
businesses?
За
According
оцінками
to
багатьох
different
опитувальних,
surveys,
на
we can
першому
see that
місці є,
factor
звичайно,
number one is
воєнні
the
дії і
hostilities and the
руйнації.
outcomes, which are
Це руйнування,
destructions
які
that do not
призведе
enable the
підприємствам
businesses
нарощувати
to
виробництво або
increase their
вимагають
production or that
додаткових
require additional investment
інвестиційних
into
заохочень
the
для
repairs
мощностей.
of their
На
capacities.
другому
The
місці
second place here
нестача
goes to lack of or to
персоналу
staff shortage
і
and
також
also
високі
high
ціни на
energy
енергоносії.
prices.
Це
These
ті
are the
чинники,
factors
які
which are
відповідають за
mentioned
те,
in the
що в
quarterly
першому опитуванні
survey of the
Національний
National
банк.
Bank of Ukraine.
І
War
війна,
and its
визнання,
outcomes
якщо чесно, не сильно
constitutes the
підсилює
main
розвивати
factor
економіки
curbing business
кінця
activity starting
22-го
with
року.
2022. At the same
Водночас
time,
нестача
a lack of
фінансування
funding and lack of
бізнес-кредитування
lending
багато років
for many
на
years
одному з
has been taking the
найнижчих
lowest places in this ranking of factors that restrain businesses in their activities. And according to the data of the fourth quarter 2025, this rate was the lowest over the whole period of observation that started in 2006.
Тому сказати,
Therefore, we
що
cannot
зараз
tell that
підприємствам не
it
вистачає
is the
саме
lending
кредитів, ми не
problem that
можемо.
businesses are
І
primarily facing. This
підприємства
would be the wrong
не
approach.
будуть
Businesses
схильні
are not
брати кредити.
prone to
Значна
get
частина людей
credits,
відмовляється
to get
тому,
loans,
що
and they claim that
відсоткові
this is
ставки
because
дуже
of high
високі.
interest
Але знову
rates.
ж таки ці
But again,
оцінки, що про те, що відсоткові ставки дуже високі, також на
these
доволі низькому
statements
рівні,
claiming that
як і
interest
взагалі
rates are very
оцінка жорстких
high
кредитних умов.
are not
Тобто
voiced quite often,
підприємства,
which means
хоча й
that though
захищають
businesses
свої
claim that this is one
співробітників
of
і не
the
дуже
important
сильно
factors
здебільшого
that
стримують
restrains their
ліквідність,
business activity, but at
але,
the same time,
також і
they
не
do
бачать
not
оце
see it
найгірші такі
as
оцінки за
the
попередні квартали.
factor that is really contributing the
Другий за
most.
містом цінних
And
сигналь про те, що
there is another
підприємство є додаткові
factor
ресурси
to
для
that,
фінансування своєї
which is that
діяльності, чому
businesses
вони не
sometimes
завжди
have additional
звертаються до
resources to finance their activities.
банківського
That's why they do not
сервісу. За
always
даними
resort
четвертого
banks for
кварталу,
lending. According to the fourth quarter,
56%
only
підприємств планують
36% of
брати
businesses
кредити у
intend to get loans
26-му
in
році,
2026,
і
and most
більша
of them
частина з них у
intend to do it in
гривнях,
hryvnias,
вже не
81% to be
підприємств.
more specific.
Також
Also, it is of
чимало
interest that
підприємств зазначають,
businesses,
але не
not
треба
many
це
businesses,
офіційно
about one
говорити,
third of
звичайно,
businesses
зазначають
claim
щодо
that
високих вимог до
the
застави це
interest
стримує
rates are high
введення
and the mortgage
запровадження
rates,
гривні
collateral rates are
позики
very
своїм
high, and that
клієнтам,
also
отримання
restrains them
кредитів,
in their
але це
um,
також не дуже високі оцінки.
requests
І
for bank lending. But
21
again, the
думають,
percentage
що
of such businesses
вони
is
не
low,
зможуть
and
просто виплатити
21% of
кредити, і
businesses
тому
think that
кредити
will
не
not be able
позичають. Тому
to
треба
repay
чекати про
loans.
те,
That's
що
why they do not address banks for
попит на
loans.
кредити
So we can see that the
запроваджуватимуть
demand for loans is not that high. The
не така
possibility of
висока, як
economy
нам
to absorb
хотілося.
credits is
І
not that high,
додатково
and
фінансовий стан
the
підприємств
financial
розгрузить як
condition of
наслідки війни
business due to the results of the
які
war
вже втратили
disables
патріотизм
businesses from
системи, що
addressing
вони
banks being
зможуть
confident of the fact that
погасити.
they will be able to
Дякую
repay
за увагу. Передаю
those
слово
loans. Thank you for
Олександрі.
attention, and let me give the floor to Alexandra.
Так, отже,
Thank you.
переходимо
So
до
let's move
фіскальної
over to the
частини
fiscal
нашого
part of
аналізу.
our
І
analysis. And
традиційно ми
traditionally, I will
почнемо
start
з
with the
дохідної
revenue
частини
part
бюджету.
for the budget.
Отже,
So, all in
загалом
all, in
за
February
лютий
this
цього
year, the
року загальний
overall
фонд
state
державного
budget
бюджету
received
розрахований
about
на 35
155 billion hryvnias of
мільярдів
tax
податкових
revenues,
надходжень.
which is
Це на
15%
15%
more
більше,
than
ніж
in
в
the first
березні
months of
цього
this
року.
year,
І
and
також цей
this
показник
figure
перевищив
also
план
exceeds the
приблизно
plan by
на
some 5%.
5%.
The plan was exceeded in all the key tax revenues. In particular, the highest dynamics from month to month was seen in the profit tax that increased about 3 times because of its seasonal nature, but it also was increased if compared within the year-to-year perspective. The income per capita tax also revenues also increased. As far as import taxes are concerned, so they spiked in February as compared to January this year. Excises rose by 40% and import VAT increased by 18% compared to January, and this was partly accounted for by a higher level of electricity imports. As far as domestic VAT is concerned, so on a month-to-month basis, it decreased a little bit, but anyway, it exceeded the plan because of higher demand for energy goods. As far as the first 2 months of this year are concerned, uh, all in all, we got about 290 billion hryvnias of tax revenues, and here we can see that the plan for those 2 months was not performed, but due to the things that happened in January and not in February. But year-on-year basis, we can see the subsoil rent growth. They they actually grew about 102%, and they also exceeded the plan by 27%, mostly due to somewhat conservative low initial targets. The next after rent tax is profit tax, which followed with 22% plus, but as far as domestic VAT is concerned, it was the only outlier. So to say, it went down a little bit, and the plan was not fulfilled by 12% due to lower economic activity. As far as the costs are concerned, the economic spending, so in the first months of this year, the total spending was unexpectedly low. It was about 268 billion hryvnias, which was definitely less on a month-on-month basis as compared to December 2025, but definitely that is a classical story because the spendings are normally low in January. But this year, January's spendings were not in accordance with the plan, and they were also lower than on a year-to-year basis, which shows that we see some underfunding. And if the trend goes on in March and February, so we will see considerable underfunding of the budget in the first quarter. The most substantial negative dynamics was shown by the spending related to defense aid. If we speak on the war spending from internal sources, the situation here was more or less stable. What affected non-fulfillment of the plan regarding spending for the first months of this year was the debt service spending. There was underperformance by 12 billion, and this became one of the main factors contributing to overall spending gap. And economic expenditures totaled just over 3 billion hryvnias, which is 10% lower than in the same period of the previous year. If we speak in general, about the functions of economic activities. So here we should mainly speak about the National Development Agency, which the main goal of which is to support business, in particular via the 579 program. And the NDI 579 program plan was at the level of 2025, which is 18 billion, and this is 10% of all economic activity spending. This program, most of the money is spent on compensating the interest rates on business loans. And in the first 2 months of this year, 3.5 billion hryvnias were spent on this, which is approximately the same amount as in 2025 in the respective periods, so there is no increased funding. So that's all for me, and let me give the floor to our third speaker. Lazar, you're welcome. Thank you. So when we speak about inflation, we can see that there was a consumer price growth that accelerated in February, both on a year-on-year and month-on-month year, and the consumer price index increased by more than in the respective period of the same year, and on a month-on-month basis, the increase was 1%. On a year-to-year, it was 7.6. So we can see what costs was prices increased. That was food, that was also fuel, because of the growing risks of the war in the Middle East. And at the end of the month, those risks were brought into reality. So we can see that though electricity supply normalized in March, and this will make energy pressure and inflation gradually eased over next month. However, it might be replaced with the oil shock if the Iran war persists. The monthly inflation impulse surged during winter. It increased three times, it tripled. First of all, because of the increase in the price of consume in the growth in the consumer prices, also industrial prices, and the demand for electricity in January and February exceeded 30%. Also, business started increasing prices at the end of February because of the increase in the Hormuz Strait. Well, in spite of the fact that the winter energy shock was majorly temporary, but this will likely result in high inflation over the next months because of the midterm effects of prices transposition. And uncertainty around high energy prices is still there because of the Iran war. So it remains elevated. This creates some pro-inflation factors, as mentioned by the National Bank today. In its decision, it was decided to leave the rate the same, and the rhetoric voiced by the National Bank was more rigid, so to say, more strict. Another news over the recent weeks has been the increase in the exchange rate of dollar, which is primarily related to the war in Iran. And as you can see in the graph to the left, there is a comparison of different FX rates of dollar after the start of the Iran war on the 28th of February, and you can see that dollar strengthened by 4% over the next two weeks. And this more or less corresponds to the rate of dollar strengthening as compared to hryvnia, as you can see it in the right graph to the right. At the same time, the hryvnia to euro exchange rate remained more or less stable. The fact that dollar strengthened after the beginning of the war was something that happened due to safe haven effects, because investors flock to U.S. treasuries as a safe asset just to avoid some uncertainty and in case any risk will be brought into reality. Let's go over to the special topic of today's discussion. This is credit growth, and if we do a certain zoom out, so we have to say that one of the factors here is the ratio between the credits given or the loans given and the GDP. And after the 2015 banking crisis in Ukraine, this ratio was going down, but with the beginning of the full-scale invasion, it got stabilized, and it was from 7 to 9%, depending on what approach we apply to calculation. So these are the figures that are much lower than in the neighboring regional peers. The liquidity of the banking system is still there, but war risks and high real interest rates keep the credit to GDP ratio far below. The non-performing loans also contribute to capital investment, and according to the State Statistics Service, over the recent years, only 5% of capital investment have been funded uh, using bank credits. Another important component in the lending growth of the recent years has been the subsidized loans program 579%. At the end of 2023, this program peaked in the bank's lending portfolio, and its importance has been in decline since. Starting with the mid-2024, the growth of credit accelerated, and this was mainly driven by market-based loans, though there is also the 579 program, which was still there and which contributing to the growth. If we have a look at the credit growth, um, depending on the periods of credit, so the main type of loan is still the medium-term loan, and as you can see over the recent months, short-term loans up to 1 year have also become more popular, which is probably related to the need to get ready and to adjust to winter and to energy deficit. At the same time, long-term loans, 5+ years, remain stagnant, and war-related risks still limit both the demand on the part of business and the supply of loans for longer periods, in particular when there is no insurance, no collateral. If we have a look at the sectoral crediting, we can see that the growth in this lending is still highly concentrated in three industries, which is trade, processing industry, and agriculture. So together they account for nearly the entire increase in the performing loan portfolio, and trade over the recent months has been taking more than 50% of new loans because of the high demand in the industry for short-term working capital. The processing industry has also seen a rise in credit growth, likely driven by investment in energy autonomy and defense adjacent production, and agriculture has also started making its contribution to the overall amount of lendings. It all started in about middle of the 2025. Thank you, Maria. Over to you. Thank you, Yelazar. Thanks a lot to Alexandra and Natalia. Thank you, dear colleagues, for this overview. So, as we can see it from the home assignment performed by you, a lot has been done. The 3 gigawatts of energy capacity have been restored for businesses, for the industry. We can also see that the attacks on our energy infrastructure have slightly gone down, so that allows us to breathe out and to be a little bit more optimistic about our future. However, we still see that there are external risks, external factors that uh, can hardly be forecasted, like the war in Iran, because of which the oil prices have uh, gone up. And there was a thing that could be expected, but nothing was done. Unfortunately, this is the CBAM mechanism that actually brought problems to our metal industry. We can see that the economy is now in the situation which is rather good, as in the background of the full-scale war, but we are thinking on how the situation could be improved. And one of the recipes here is definitely investment. While investment is not possible if there is no good banking system and if the role of the banking system is not strengthened. That's why our topic is to how to increase lending for businesses. And you have seen it from the presentations delivered by my colleagues Natalia and Eleazar that though lending has increased, but the scope of lending is still not sufficient to cover the current needs of the economy and for the banking loan to penetrate into the system. The level of those loans is only 9% of GDP, which shows a significant lagging behind the figures that we have in other countries and even below. This is below the figure that we used to have ourselves in 2015. Eleazar has mentioned today that only 5% of investment is made by companies out of loans, while otherwise they are trying to find some additional money from other sources. This means that actually we have a sufficiently underperforming capacity and we need to think it over how to activate it, how to strengthen the role of banks in the strengthening of our economy in total. And we will speak about this with our three speakers. And let me remind you that you can ask questions in the Q&A session or chat. So today we have Andrita Lupa, advisor to the Ministry for Economy, Environment and Agriculture, Natalia Budkova-Vitvitska, member of the Management Board of Ashtat Bank and the person responsible for SMEs there. And we will also have Parvinda Dashova, who is the director of the Department of Financial Stability of the National Bank of Ukraine. So let me start, and my first question goes to Andriy Lupa. Andriy, I know that economic growth for the Minister of Economy is something that really matters. I know that you've been desperately trying to help businesses over the recent years via plenty of programs, and when you were deputy minister you were dealing with that, and now as the advisor to the minister you're also doing this. So why does bank lending matter to you? What is the role of the banking sector in the economic growth of the country and in the strengthening of our resilience according to the ministry? So over to you, Andrei. Good afternoon to everyone. Well, the Minister of Economy has been advocating the interests of business, economy. We care for the development of economy, and we constantly have this dialogue with the National Bank of Ukraine, which is responsible for financial stability, and the Ministry of Finance, which deals with budget replenishment. Therefore, bank lending for us is really important. It's a resource for the economy, the resource which is important for the functioning. It's like the system of vessels that is supposed to feed the economy. And if we analyze last year, we have got two news, one bad news and one good news. The good one is that the National Bank can see that lending has increased by 1/3, by more than 30%, which is quite a lot. But as it has been mentioned in the presentations, the 7% rate of 7% of GDP is a very low figure as compared to the neighboring countries. And here we can see a very good capacity for economic growth and for the development of Ukrainian business. The banking sector has to play a really important role in all this. The major part of the banking sector in Ukraine is state-owned banks, and we think that state-owned banks should not only replenish the budget for the Ministry of Finance, but they should also be supporting businesses. This is an important function of state-owned banks, and at the moment we also try to think how the government could actually increase energy funding out of bank lending, because the task for this year is to develop decentralized generation at the amount of 3 gigawatts, and without banking resources it's almost unrealistic. Therefore, we are consistently working on the increase in this lending, and our main tool is our largest program within the made in Ukraine policy, which is accessible credits, affordable credits 579. And for 3 years, we have had 18 billion hryvnias per year of compensation, which enables us to give about 95 up to 100 billion hryvnias a year. We can see that there is a demand because last year the amount was about 25,000. This was the number of businesses, Ukrainian businesses, who used the program. And we, as the holders of this program, are happy that its share in our portfolio is going down gradually. Let's say if we take the year 2022, so most probably the picture has frozen. Andriy, are you still with us? So, economy cannot exist if there is no state support for a business. That's why last year we focused on investment credits and on supporting our frontline regions. So you can see that Andrei's internet is poor. You have lost me. Yes, we lost you for a moment when you were talking about the frontline areas and the plans of the ministry regarding those areas. We think that the state should focus its support on the areas where the market is rather limited. We can see that banks provide limited funding to frontline areas. This means that this is the area which should be the focus of our attention. And investment loans are also important because they have a more positive effect on GDP growth and on the economy in general. That's why we focus on processing industry. And from 579, we have almost taken away the floating circulating assets, and in that way we try to focus on the sectors that provide the highest added value and which provide for the prospects of economic growth. And besides 579, we try to do some other things. And it was yesterday that we had a meeting with the National Bank, with banks, with the Prime Minister, and we discussed the issue of increasing funding with a focus of energy this year while preparing for winterization. And the problem is not only about interest rates, because the interest rates so far are more or less good for businesses, but that's more an issue of mortgage, of regulation. And here we try to give the bank the portfolio guarantees and expand international guarantee programs. Like when we have some IFIs involved, it works better. And the banks have told us that this is a fully working tool which helps to expand lending, but it's of course a long and bureaucratic tool, and we are now working with our partners and trying to accelerate this process. So these are the key lines of our activity, but definitely I have to tell that lending should play an important role in the development of Ukraine, and we as the Ministry of Economy are trying to really uh, encourage bank lending to boost the economy. And then here is another quick question I would like to ask you. Does the Ministry of Economy have some sectors that you target as the priority ones besides the energy sector? Which sectors are most important for you, and where do you think banks should direct their resources? Oh, yes, we have a rather targeted activity. So besides the energy sector, we focus on the processing industry because even according to the World Bank analysis, it has got the highest development capacity and it will contribute to the GDP development. Then agricultural processing, this should be done within the context of our integration into the EU market. And definitely, this is also Miltech. which is a quickly developing direction, and the infrastructural sector like transport, logistic infrastructure, since that is also critical for the development of the economy. As an economist, I cannot but agree with you regarding all those lines of activity, in particular agricultural processing. We have just recently had an event on how Ukraine should join the EU and how it can be done in the easiest way possible. So we discussed the issues of our relationship with our neighbors, and in the focus of attention we had agro-processing. Thank you for mentioning the program of portfolio guarantees and IFIs. I know that within the second pillar of its program, Ukraine facility, the EU is working with Ukrainian banks for them to be able to support Ukrainian companies. So this is something that exists besides, in addition to our national programs. So we know that policymakers responsible for state policies are mainly trying to stimulate the development of bank lending. That's why we've invited a representative of the bank, which is one of the largest banks, the state-owned Oshchad Bank, the bank with many divisions, many clients, both from the small business sector and from large business. So we've got Natalia Budkova-Vitvitska. Natalia is a member of the management board of Oshchad Bank, and I would ask Natalia to tell us more about the dynamics that you can trace at the moment. Maybe you could compare what we have with the beginning of the war. What is the dynamics of lending? Has it become better? Who approaches you to get some loans? Do you have many companies approaching you to get loans? Do they do you have anyone coming to get support with not with just within the state-owned programs or IFI's programs? So over to you. Yes, thank you.
Дякую.
Welcome to
Дякую.
everyone.
І почну з того,
So let me
що
start with
розкажу про
telling you
наш
about our
банк
bank
трохи
and just a
і
little
про
bit and about the
сегменти, з
segments with
якими
which our
працює
bank
наш банк.
works. So
Ми
we are a large
великий
universal bank.
універсальний банк.
We
Ми
work
працюємо
both
і
with the
великим
micro
сегментом,
segment
з
and
малим і
medium
середнім
business
бізнесом,
and
і з
large
великим
corporations.
корпоративним бізнесом. З
Um,
початку
at the beginning
війни
of the war,
лише в мікро-малому середньому сегменті ми збільшили
we
наш
increased our
кредитний
credit
портфель
portfolio for
майже
SMEs almost
4
4
рази
times,
вже на сьогоднішній момент, маючи
having
дуже низький
a very
рівень
low
простроченої
levels of
заборгованості,
non-performing
менше
loans, less than one,
1. Це дуже
of
якісний наш
outstanding debts, which
кредитний
means that
портфель.
our credit portfolio
Практично
is actually of high
виплатили
quality.
свої
All
зобов'язання
commitments
перед
to the
банком,
bank
і
are
ми раді, що ми
fulfilled, and we are happy to be
зростаємо
growing
в такий
in such a high
якісний
quality
спосіб.
way. In
Додатково
addition,
хочу
let me also
сказати, що ми
mention that
працюємо по
we
всій
work throughout the
території
whole territory
України.
of
І на
Ukraine, both in
фронтовій
the frontline
території ми
area,
проходимо
and
останні з цих
we
територій,
try to
підтримуючи і фізичних осіб,
support
і
both legal
юридичних
entities
осіб.
and private individuals, private entrepreneurs.
І
And if
якщо
we
говорити про
speak about the
стратегію нашого
strategy of
банку
our
на
bank
цей рік і
for
на
this year
майбутні
and
роки,
for the
наша
next two
стратегія
years, our
полягає в
strategy
тому, щоб обсяг
states that
кредитного
the
портфелю зростав
volume of credit
щороку
portfolio
на
is to
20%,
increase from year to year by
незважаючи на те,
20%,
якою
regardless of the
динамікою
dynamics
буде
that the market will
демонструвати ринок.
show.
Стагнація,
Whether it will
падіння,
be a
невеликий
stagnation
зріст
or a decline or a
кредитного
small
портфелю.
decrease in the credit
Банкові
portfolio. The bank
стратегічна
does have
програма
the
до
strategic
28
program
року,
until
яка
2028, which
передбачає
presupposes
зростання
the
кредитних
increase in
портфелів
credit
у всіх
portfolios in all
сегментах,
segments,
і
be
в
it
мікро, і в
micro,
малому,
small,
і в
medium,
середньому, і
and
великому
large
корпоративному бізнесі.
business.
Якщо говорити про
If we speak
динаміку з
about the
початку
dynamics
цього
starting with the
року
beginning of this
і
year,
дивитися
and we
рік
have
до року,
to compare it
26
year on year,
порівняно з 25 роком,
2026 and
то зростає
2025.
попит на
So, is there
фінансування.
any
І
increase
якщо
in the demand
зростає,
for
то
funding? And if yes,
наскільки?
then at
Кількість
what rate? So,
кредитних
the number of
заявок
credit applications
року до
on
року,
the
які
year-to-year
отримуємо ми,
basis
зростає
increases
на
by 10%.
10%.
which means if we compare February of the previous year with February of this year, we get positive dynamics, which is 10% higher. You asked me the question whether there is any funding on market terms and how does this funding change. We saw it from the previous speakers that the turning year for our country was the year 2023, when the volume of funding under 579 started going down, while standard classical funding schemes were becoming more popular. At the moment, out of 10 credits, approximately 6 credits are issued by us within the 579 programs and 4 are issued on classical standard funding terms.
І
And
якщо
if we speak,
говорити, взагалі теж
well,
хочу підтвердити,
let me
що
first confirm some data.
у нас ми відображаємо структуру
We
нашого ВВП як
have
переробну індустрію,
processing industry,
розвиток портфелю
agriculture
займає
in
найбільшу
our
частину
loans. The
вагів,
share
і у
of
мікромалому-середньому
these industries
ми
is the
якраз
highest for
так
SMEs, and we as
спеціалізуємось
the bank
на
also specialize on
сьогодні.
defense
Ви
industry.
знаєте,
We
що
know, you know that we are the
більшість
leader in
цьому
this
напрямку фінансування ми
direction of
підтримуємо
finance. We
фінансування
support
цієї
funding for
галузі
this
обслуговування таких типів
industry, for
бізнесів.
this direction
Але
and
в нас є
service such businesses. But
дуже
we've also got
специфічні
some
програми, які нас
specialized
відрізняють.
programs
Окреме фінансування
like
для
funding
жінок,
for
окреме
women,
фінансування
funding
для
for veterans
транспортбізнесу,
businesses,
окреме
funding for
фінансування
relocated
торговельних
businesses,
підприємств,
export-oriented
експортно-ринкових
businesses.
підприємств.
So all of
Всі
them
вони враховують
take into
специфіку
account the
даних
specificity
підприємств
of
для того,
this
щоб
type of businesses, and we
полегшити
try to
цій
actually make it
структурі, щоб
easier for
доступ до
those businesses
фінансування.
to get
Так,
access to
наприклад,
funding.
ми фінансуємо
Let's say we
ветеранів,
finance startup
стартап-бізнесів,
businesses
які
of
не мають
veterans
такого
who didn't
досвіду
have any
цього
previous
у
experience of doing
бізнесі,
business,
підприємницькій діяльності. Є
because
особливості, як ми це робимо,
that
але
is a
взагалі
highly
про такі
specific
можливості
line of
є.
activity.
І якщо ми говоримо
If
як
we
і
speak about the
перепони
barriers in
по
terms of
фінансуванню у
financing
бізнесів на
businesses,
поточний момент,
and
чому
if we
все ж
speak
таки
about why
сьогодні
still it
9%
is only
ВВП у нас,
9%
да?
of GDP,
Це
I mean
структуру від
9%
ВВП
of credit
потрібні
portfolio that
портфелі, у
we have in
нас
the
є
structure of
потенціал до
GDP,
зростання,
and
то
if we mention
я
that
би
we still
хотіла
have some
відмітити
growth
наступні
capacity, let
чинники.
me point out the following
Отриманих
factors.
заявок
Based,
ми
well,
погоджуємо
we
близько
have
70%. До видачі доходять
let's say
5,
we have 10
може 4, в
applications. Out of
залежності від
them, we
сегменту. Чому
approve
вони не
about
проходять?
7 to
По-перше,
8 of them. Why do not they
строки
reach?
прийняття
Why
рішень
don't they
по
reach the final
банки
stage?
приймають рішення
Because
через
first of
певний
all,
період,
banks need
зручний,
a certain period of
чекаючи
time
цей
to take a
інвестиційний проект. Це
decision,
може
and
бути
this
2-3
may be
місяці.
happening
І цей
for
період
about
може
2 or 3
змінитись
months,
багато
and
чого,
a lot of
коли
things can actually
підстава
change over
до
2 or 3 months, and
отримання
then
кредиту знижується, а ще
the
можливо
capacity
конкурувати
for
ці
getting the
банки за
credit
ринку саме
is
зараз.
going
Тому
down,
у
and
зв'язку
several
з
banks may
цим
actually be
ми, як
competing for
банк, в
one and the
цьому
same
році будемо
application.
дуже
That's why
зменшувати свої
this
строки
year we as a
прийняття
bank are
рішень.
going to shorten
Для
those
нас дуже
periods of
важлива
decision making,
репутація,
because
кредитна
for
історія
us,
і
definitely
прибуткова
profitable
діяльність
activity and credit
підприємств.
history
Все
of
це
companies
основні
are
фактори по
important, but these
фінансуванню.
are all the
Якщо ми
main
беремо
barriers.
підприємство, в
If
якого
we
є
have
великі підрядники,
businesses
ми
that
будемо
have been
фінансувати. Якщо ми
profitable for two
бачимо
years,
непрозору структуру власності, ми не йдемо в фінансування. Але
we
взагалі
will not provide the
всі до
funding.
80%
But
це
actually,
показник позитивного прийому
80% of our
рішень при
decisions
загальної
are
кількості заявок. Він досить
positive, and this
досить
is quite an
адекватний. Це
adequate figure. I
нормальна
would say that
ринкова
it
практика
testifies
і в
to
Україні, і за
a
межами,
good
і за
market
межами України
practice, both
теж.
in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine.
Що
What else can I
додати?
add
Да?
here?
Що додати?
I would
Від
like to
себе
say
хочу
that
сказати, що
we
ми працюємо як фінансовий хаб. Ми
are a
імплементуємо
bank and
всі
we
наявні державні
follow and
програми,
implement
програми
all
Євросоюзу,
available
ініціативи
Ukrainian
Євросоюзу,
programs,
всіх
EU
міжнародних
programs,
партнерів.
and the programs
І
of our
в
international
цифрах це
partners. And if
виглядає
we
так.
speak in figures,
Кожна
this
друга заявка в
means
нас
that every
подається з
second
гарантійним механізмом.
application
Що таке
is
гарантійний
issued with a
механізм?
certain
Він,
guarantee
якщо
mechanism which
вимоги
mitigates
до
the
застави
requirements
позичків.
for collateral.
Половина наших
Half of
клієнтів
our
не дає
clients do
заставу,
not
а
give any
за
collateral or
зайвих
mortgage,
клієнтів
but instead of
заставу
them, a
видає
partner can
партнер
give this
або
collateral,
держава,
be
це
it
державні
the
гарантії,
state, if
або
these are state
ЄБРД,
guarantees,
РБІ,
or
АІФ, в
EBRD,
залежності від
BRD,
того,
EIB,
з ким
depending on
енергетичний
what
банк
financial
працює.
institution we currently work
Кожна
with. Every
десята
10th
заявка
application
отримує, кожен
or
десятий
every
клієнт
10th client
отримує у нас в
gets
банку
from our bank some
допомогу у
support
вигляді
in the grant
гранту. І
form.
ми
And we are the largest financial hub in Ukraine via which this grant component is being implemented. I mean, both, I'm talking both about state grants and international
Думаю,
grants.
що
Let me also
туризм
get back to our
ще раз
strategy in order to stress it
підкреслю,
once again
що ми
that
маємо
we've
з
got a
пропозицією
strategic
урядової
goal,
найближчі 3
which is
роки
to grow
зростати в
in our
кредитному
credit
портфелі, і це
portfolios over
буде
over the
відображатись
next 3
і
years.
в
And this will be
розвитку продуктів,
manifested in
які
the
ми
development of the
пропонуємо на
products that we
національному
offer on
ринку,
standard classical terms,
процесів, які ми будемо
processes that we
спрощувати,
will
і
try to shorten
кооперації
in terms of time, and
безпосередньо
our cooperation
для
with international
розвитку.
partners. Thank you.
Дякую.
Thanks a lot, Natalia. It has been of interest to listen to you. It's always interesting to listen to practitioners and to hear what works, what doesn't, and how it works. And let me now go over to another practitioner, another person who works with the credit market in the market, but on the side of the regulator. So we have got Parvin Dadashova now. So both the ministry has said that there are some growth opportunities, and the bank has been saying that in their strategy they have the plan for a 20% increase in the lending portfolio. And definitely, we have the National Bank of Ukraine, which is supposed to ensure price stability and financial stability in the country, which means that economic growth and lending growth do become priorities only after the National Bank of Ukraine stops being concerned about the fact that the prices in Ukraine are going to be rising drastically. Well, we have had a look at the 579 program, and we have heard that 6 out of 10 loans are issued under this program, and other programs are not that much popular, which means that in the policy of the National Bank, in the sterilization, liquidity policy, the high interest rates policies do contain an element of restricting access to financial resources of the bank. We saw that the inflation rate was 5%, but we haven't ever seen the cases when the rate goes to 13. Now it's fixed at the level of 15%, but I would like to ask you, Perween, what should happen for the National Bank of Ukraine to uh, put the goal of economic growth as a priority? What should be the situation in which we would see that the National Bank is really taking effort to deal with this? Well, thank you for the
Дякую
question.
запитання.
First
Дуже
of all, I
хотіла
have to tell
підкреслити ваша
that your
теза
statement
стосовно того, які
about the
стратегії
priorities of the
Національного
National
банку
Bank
власне
of
не
Ukraine
співпадає з тим,
somewhat
що
does not
стратегія та
coincide
свої
with
пріоритети, які
our
визначив
vision
Національний банк.
of our
Діло в
priorities.
тому,
Let's
що
start with saying
власне
that
ситуація
not only in
сьогодні
wartime, but
зазвичай
in
лягає
general, it has
завжди
always been the case that
пріоритетності
our
частина
priority
збереження
task
цінової
has
стабільності,
been
друга
price
задача
stability,
це
then
фінансова
financial
стабільність,
stability,
і
and the
третя
third
задача це
task of
за
ours
можливості в разі
has
досягнення цих двох
been
цілей
to
це
contribute
сприяння
to
відновленню
economic
розвитку та
growth.
вкладення
That
в
is actually
інфраструктурі,
what the
законодавство і
Constitution and the
Національний банк.
law on
Тому
the National
тут
Bank
якраз
says.
свої
That's why
можливості в цій
um,
пріоритизації вони
we
відіграють
see
дуже вагому
such
виклик.
three important
А от що
priorities.
з воєнними
But
особливостями пов'язаному, або навіть питання не
there are some
можливості
things that are
пов'язані, а
related
в
to the
розумінні
war, or
загальної
rather,
мети,
not even to the war, but to the
контексту,
understanding of the
фактично Національний банк
overarching
досить
goal and the
послідовно і
context.
вже багато
And
років
here, I
говорить
mean
про
that for
наступні
several
роки
years we have been
всіх
saying as a national
свої
bank that all our
кредитовані
regulatory
плани
plans
насправді
are in fact
здійснюємо в балансі
brought into
збереження
reality in
фінансової
trying
стабільності
to
та підтримки
both
розвитку кредитування.
secure
Але,
financial
як
stability
ми
and
задекларували
support
ще в
development
першому
and
півріччі
crediting. This is
23-го
something that
кредитування,
was fixed in
і
the credit
відповідно ми
lending
насправді ці
development
процеси
strategy in
підкреслюємо
2024,
свою
and this is an
роботу. На
overarching
щастя,
objective for
це не
us.
потребує від нас
Luckily,
якогось
this goal does not make us to see any contradictions between our smaller objectives, and we go on with our track towards the implementation of regulatory requirements and alignment of the Ukrainian legislation with the EU acquis and our standards with the EU standards. In a way, this enabled us to even loosen our requirements that historically were there. But the results can sometimes be seen on display, so to say, in figures. The credits last year for business increased by more than 35%, and this growth is still there. The credits in foreign currency also increased by about 20% year-on-year basis. So this is a very high figure. If we have a historical insight, we will see that we didn't have such rates over a certain period of time before the full-scale invasion, and only in 2021 we had very positive dynamics, and then it was also terminated due to the Russian aggression. So I think that we have now managed to get back to such figures, and this is quite an achievement. If we compare the size of portfolios, we can also see that the size of the portfolio is higher than before the full-scale invasion. Along with that, definitely, I think that we have a very good characteristics of Ukrainians in terms of motivation. We always want more. We're always ambitious to get more and quicker. Uh, so that is one of the reasons why we don't see the same level of loans penetration as in other countries. I would encourage everyone to be very precautious, because if we compare Ukraine of today with Ukraine in the past, and if we operate some figures in terms of the lending to GDP ratio, we also have to take it into account that, let's say, in the year 2015, quite a share of loans that were statistically issued was the money that actually just disappeared. The businesses probably even didn't receive the money. We can recall the case of Privat Bank, when formerly the loans were issued to someone in the amount of more than 100 billion hryvnias, but the money was lost. Actually, the economy didn't get the money, and it's only now, to be more specific, last year, that there was a positive court sentence for Ukraine regarding the compensations to be paid to the bank for the damages incurred in 2014 or even before. So when we are talking about the lending to GDP ratio, we should focus on the real lending picture. Today, all the money given by banks is the money issued for development and the money issued for supporting the activity of businesses. And luckily, we can see some growth here. We can see that the first time for the last 10 years, the credit to GDP ratio has increased significantly. If we speak about loans given to businesses after a sudden improvement in 2021, this is the first major increase. So we should not underestimate what we've got, because please bear it in mind that we have war, we have risks present there. So I would not speak about risk aversion by banks, because increasing your loan lending portfolio by a considerable share from year to year, it's not about risk aversion. But we understand that there is a lot of room for improvement, and gradually we would like to achieve the same ratios that they have in European countries. But for this, we need consistent steps. And let me also mention another point. Today, it was already mentioned what the distribution between market-based and subsidized loans is.
кредитування.
I
чую
heard
дня
the
разом з
statistical data
колегами
from
про статистику
Bank, but the
ринку
market
безробіття.
statistics is a little bit
Нові
different
кредити
because
близько чверті
about
кредитів
1/4 of new
надається саме
loans
державною
is
програмою підтримки.
issued under
Бюджетні
state support
крешти це
programs, while other
несубсидійовані кредити.
three shares are
Також були
non-subsidized
сьогодні
loans. And
надавали
today, some
статистичного
statistics
заходу,
was
як
mentioned.
зростали
It was
кредити
said that
на
long-term credits
зростаючі,
are not
які
on the
відповідали
rise. Probably it
доведеним до
depends on
кредитів
how you are
кредити за
dividing
строком.
credits by periods.
Обсяг
The
кредитів строком від 3 років
volume
становить
of
більше,
credits
ніж кредити до 3 років.
for periods longer
Да,
than
ми
3 years
досить
is
мало
increasing quicker
такого
than
довгих строків, тому що горизонт
the
кредитування
category
бізнесу
under 3 years.
дуже короткий,
Of course, we have a
врахуванням
lot of
війни,
risks, in
але
particular
є
the
ризики,
war-related
які
risks,
є.
but that's the tendency which is
Якщо
also there.
говорити, я думаю, що ми
I think
про
that
це окремо
we will have a
додатково
separate
поговоримо про те, що ми
discussion
бачимо реально за необхідні
about
кроки
our
в рамках
steps that
поліпшення
we see as the
прогресу,
ones required to
то
improve
ми
progress. But
коротко
to put it
працюємо
just in
разом з
brief, I have
колегами
to tell
і
that
насправді
we
сьогодні
work
банк
together with our colleagues. The
ініціював
National
в
Bank
червні році
initiated in
взагалі
2024 the
стратегію зовнішнього кредитування за
loan
єврозоною.
development or lending
Ініціювали
development
стратегію
strategy.
стабільності
Then we
кредитування.
initiated
Тому
mortgage
ми точно
lending
бачимо
development strategy.
глобальний
So
і
we definitely
розвиток
see it as our task to
фінансування
develop
бізнесу і
this sector of
модернізацію
financing
певний
businesses
і
via
покращувати
banking system
банківську установу.
and via
При цьому
non-banking
ми
financial
також маємо
institutions. But we
розуміти, що
have to
без
bear it in mind
збереження
that
і
if there is
стабільності
no
макропоказників
financial stability preserved and
без
if
збереження
inflation is not
безпекових і
tamed um,
таргетованого
at the
рівня,
targeted
то
level,
сам
the very
процес
process of
кредитування
loan issuance
буде
will not be
можливий тільки
possible
коли
over
дійсно
the long run.
ми
That's why
точно
definitely
втримаємо
it is our priority.
кредитування.
Lending is our priority,
Я
and
співперечую
I
з тим,
don't
що
see
нашими цілями
actually
є
any
щастя
contradiction between our
Тобто у
goals.
вас зараз,
So,
як я
as I've
сказала,
mentioned, your
перша
first
ціль
goal
це
is
цінова
price
стабільність,
stability, the
друга ціль
second goal
це
is financial
фінансова
stability,
стабільність,
and the
і
third goal
третя
is
ціль це
actually
підтримка
supporting
економічного
economic
зростання. І ви
growth.
бачите, що
Uh,
зараз Національний банк вже,
which,
власне,
as
до
you
неї
can see,
прямує так,
the
як і
National
точна
Bank of Ukraine
політика.
is already heading forward in its current
Супер,
strategy and
дуже
policy.
дякую. Зараз
Great, thank you.
переходимо
And
до
let's
другого
go over
раунду
to the second
питань.
round of
Так, ми з
questions.
вами, напевне,
I
що
think
почули
that we
ситуацію,
have
яка
all
зараз
heard
є
what
станом
the current
на
situation
зараз
is
і
like,
в
both with the
банку, і в
bank and the Ministry of
економіці в
Economy and with
регулятора.
the regulator.
І зараз
And
насправді
now
хочеться
let us
поговорити
speak
про
about
рішення,
the
які
decisions and
можливі
possible
кроки
next
і
steps
ще на майбутнє, а може
in the
уряд
future.
або
Maybe the
регулятор,
government or the
або навіть
regulator or even the
корпоративам
market could
вжити
really
і
take some
вчинити для того,
steps
щоб
for the
українська
Ukrainian economy
економіка
to
зміцнилася,
become
а
more resilient
компанії
and
могли
for companies to
розраховувати на
really be
ваш
able to rely
фінансовий
on
ресурс.
banking
Першою я хочу дати
resources. And let me
слово
give the floor to
Наталії.
Natalia
Напевне, як
as a practitioner.
практику для того,
Um,
щоб ви могли
Natalia, could you
прокоментувати, адже ви
please give your
працюєте
comments?
з
Because you
дуже
work
багатьма
with many
програмами
support
підтримки.
programs,
Ви
you can
бачите
see the
відгуки
feedback
від
provided by
компаній, які
companies
є
that are direct
безпосередніми
beneficiaries
власне
or
target
which are the
є
target
людьми, на які ці
audience for
програми орієнтовані. І ви
these
бачите
programs.
відгуки жовті.
So could you please
Скажіть,
tell
будь ласка,
us
Оля, які
what
програми
programs are
успішні, які
successful, what
не
programs are
настільки
not that
успішні,
much
не
successful
користуються
and
таким
popular?
попитом, які з них
What
треба,
programs
можливо,
probably need
якось
to be
відкрутити, щось
readjusted,
покращити, щось змінити в
improved?
них. І
And
прошу вас, от
I would
я
ask
хотіла
you
б
to
подивитися, як
apply a
програми
broad
є
view and
не
to say,
відмінними, якісь речі, як ті
to speak
програми,
about
які міжнародних
international
партнерів, в яких ви берете участь.
partner programs and the
Давайте зараз,
579
напевно, що
program.
3-4
I
хвилини
think that I
на
will give
відповідь
you
на
about
запитання,
3 or 4
які
minutes to
для
answer
них у
this
нас
question
є
because
трішки
we need to go
запитання.
over to the
Дякую,
questions that are
Наталя.
um,
Прошу до слова.
asked by our
Я хочу сказати,
participants.
що
Yes,
бачу
I would
і
like to say
фіксую,
that I actually can
що
see it that there are three
гібридні
types of
програми.
programs.
Перші
The first
пом'якшують
type of programs
рівень відсоткової
mitigates the
ставки. Його
interest
роблять
rate,
не ринковим,
making
а
it more
більш
loyal.
вигідним.
The
Другі
second type of
програми
programs
зменшують вимоги до
reduces the
застави.
requirements for mortgage.
Якщо,
Let's say,
наприклад, раніше
if
ти
it used to be the
береш
case that
10
you
тисяч гривень, ти маєш
were
надати
taking
банку заставу
10,000
10 тисяч
hryvnias,
гривень,
you had to
але
provide the collateral
наразі
amounting
нові
to
програми
10,000
роблять
hryvnias.
можливим
But
надати
according to those
заставу
new
на рівні
programs, you
5
give the
тисяч гривень.
collateral amounting to
Третій
5,000
тип
programs.
програм –
And
це програми
the third
відгукувального
type of program
компоненту
is
або
the
blended
blended
finance,
finance programs or
коли
grant
ти
component
береш
programs. When you get
кредитування
the
і отримуєш
loan and you
частину
get
кешбеку,
uh,
безповоротньо
a part of irreversible financial aid. All those three types of programs do stimulate finance for companies, but the key to success, and the key item here is programs with guarantee mechanisms. At the moment, we have such programs with the EBRD and with the EIB that aim at different objectives and target different things. And if we speak about
мовою цифр, без цих програм ми б видали умовно за минулий рік 7 мільярдів гривень в сегменті мікро, малого, середнього, а з цими програмами ми видали 15. Тобто подвоїли фінансування. Але це і програми державні з державним гарантійним механізмом, державна портфельна гарантія, яка, але маленький вплив, і програма з фондом часткового гарантування. Це всі ці програми зменшують вимоги до застави наших підприємців. Що ще нам, як країні і банку, потрібно дорозвивати? Програма з ЄІБом має на меті енергоцілі, фінансування енергопроєктів для маленьких муніципалітетів і ОТГ. Такий тип фінансування, він не дуже легкий для нашої країни через те, що маленькі муніципалітети і ОТГ тільки вчаться розробляти такі проекти, здійснювати аудит, і ми всі як країни вчимось фінансувати не великі муніципалітети, а новенькі.
I'm sorry, there were some technical issues. So that's a new skill for our site and for our bank as well. And the number of such projects is not that large, but for the state, it's of strategic importance. And we have received actually the direction, the line amounting to 50 million euro from the EIB to support our energy objectives. If we speak as about the conclusion in terms of what has the major effect on the development of lending, I would say that the guarantee mechanism has the major impact, as well as the 579 state-owned program. What else do we need to develop? We, as the country and the bank, need to additionally develop the competences for financing small municipalities with a view to introducing energy projects, implementing energy projects. Thank you. Thank you, Natalia. And let me go over to Pervin. And this is my last question before we go over to the Q&A, because the questions are there for Andrei. So it's really true that Ukrainians are very ambitious and they want to get everything quickly and to get more. It's a standard story. You know, I worked with Europeans after we became the candidate for the accession. I can really say this. You've mentioned that the National Bank does have a strategy, and today we have mentioned several indicators that we consider to be illustrative and exemplary in terms of assessing the contribution of the bank system to the economy, which is bank loan penetration and the share of investment into companies that are funded from credits. So do you have such indicators in your strategy, and what are the points in time when you would like to achieve certain figures? I mean, how quickly would you like to be in terms of the results, and what results would you like to get? Let me mention that the very strategy was developed as an interagency one. We had it approved at the Financial Stability Council's meeting with the representation of different ministries and agencies. including the office of the president as well. We had their meetings also at this meeting, and the strategy includes some measures that have been identified not only for the National Bank but for all those ministries and other agencies. In this strategy, we have not actually focused on quantitative indicators because then you have a vague idea of what needs to be done. We didn't focus on figures. We just identify some most important lines of activity, but of course we try to see whether the deadlines are met or not. The strategy is to be followed by the institutions and not by the market actors. That's why we cannot decide instead of them or for them how quickly lending should be provided. And here let me refer to what Natalia has mentioned. In March, we have been dealing with the update of the strategy because it was adopted in 2024 and a lot of things have been done over this period of time. Like I can mention here the launching of loans for energy projects amounting to 36 billion hryvnias. Also, the social program for compensation of interest rates for companies from the defense sector, I mean SMEs. This is also something that we have launched, as well as a number of activities for other priority sectors, including the previous initiatives with the reformatting of 579. So the results are there. We do trace the results, but I cannot say that we ground our conclusions based on some qualitative indicators. What we now focus attention on in this update is the fact that we need to consider expansion of access to guarantees, primarily international guarantees, because that's important. It's not only the state that should be supporting, and we would also focus on the increased role of all institutions. I can see the question in the chat. The question is for Andrei, but actually I would probably cover it. Over the recent year and a half, the state has really created good infrastructure with the law. The National Development Agency adopted. So in fact, we do have our own development bank as represented by this agency, but we would need to we also need the fund of partial guarantees for agricultural loans. So we have a lot of things done, and we will have to focus on their implementation in the future. Natalia has also mentioned that we would need to work with municipalities, and the updated strategy would also include this information. We also need to improve our skills of working with consortium credits of banks and with projects, because long-term lending is one thing, but project crediting is another story. So we also have to focus on on some additional inputs that we would need to develop this line of activity. Another important element of the strategy is the right collection of data or demand collection, because we hear a lot uh, and I'm talking here not just about the NBU, but about all the state authorities. We hear a lot about availability of demand for finance, but quite often we don't go any further. Some general information saying that the demand is there, but our task should be to do demand collection, to structure this demand, to put it down into components, and to understand which of those components are not being implemented and why. So we need to structure this process in a better way, engaging our colleagues from the Ministry of Economy. And finally, there is also another very important thing. In order to get a long-term result, we need to lay down the consistency, the basis. That's why a number of legislative amendments would be needed to create the rules for working with regulation of debts and debt service. This is required for us to have no doubts that this crediting period would be uninterrupted with no major fluctuations in the future. Thank you. It's going to be very interesting for me to see the strategy. Let's hope that it will really yield, economic growth, the expected result. And finally, let me ask Andriy Taluka to comment upon the things mentioned by Natalia and Privin. Maybe tell us what your vision for the time being is. Would you like to say anything about your plans and about your expectations, taking into account the things mentioned by the previous speakers? And then we will have 15 minutes to cover the questions. Yes, thank you. Well, let me mention that this lending development strategy is quite a good and adequate strategy. Therefore, we also work with the National Bank, and we see that this strategy doesn't only aim on the development of regulation, but it aims to also increase lending. And in general, if I am to provide some reflections, I can tell that we, as the Ministry of Economy, try to work with lending both from the point of view of supply and from the point of view of demand as well. Because, well, with supply, everything is more or less clear. Now we have martial law, we have full-scale invasion, and therefore the commercial market cannot be fully meet all the business needs by itself, in particular in frontline areas, in some categories of businesses. Let's say not all businesses are ready to finance the military sector. And I think that also the same holds true for the energy sector. That's why we, as the ministry, try to work with priority areas uh, to reduce the interest rates for the credits to become cheaper. And yesterday we heard it from the banks that the major problem now is with the problem with guarantees. And we will try to focus on this in order to support businesses from the point of view of this aspect. And another important aspect for us is de-risking, which means reduction of risks, because this is something that affects the situation with lending. And we can see gradual development of military risks insurance market, and we have launched, starting with the new year, the compensation program containing two components. One for the frontline regions where insurance companies wouldn't like to work, they have direct compensation. And yesterday, the government passed a decision to increase those limits because we heard that it's really required for frontline areas, and we already have 30 million hryvnias of compensation. This is quasi insurance via the Export and Import Agency. And the other component is compensation for insurance policies, which means that we compensate the difference between the two aspects by 1%, which means that the business has to take insurance at the rate of 1%. We compensate for the difference, and you don't have to wait all the year round. You will just be able to apply after a month on day 31. In this program, we already have got 72 applications, and now, after some changes have been introduced, the compensation on insurance policies has been increased to 3 million hryvnias. So we will have a new wave of applications, as we think there will be a surge in that, and that will be a good opportunity for businesses to have insurance for their property. And this program can also be combined with bank products. It's going to be a little bit easier to get loans, and we hope that banks will be our main provider that will enable us to reach the segment of SMEs. And I think that military risks insurance should work not only for large corporations, enterprises, but for small cafe owners. They should also have this opportunity to come and take their insurance. Therefore, the lending supply and offer will increase. And here we are also working on the development of our support coming from international partners. They are rather active, and we can see real results of the program. With the EBRD, we have an additional program with on additional funding, and with EBRD, we have the de-risking program for transport and We've got the demand because 110 million euros has already been used, and at the moment the EBRD is launching new funding for this program. So we're increasing opportunities for banks and we are improving conditions for businesses. But I would also like to mention that there is a problem with demand because quite often banks tell us that businesses come with unbankable projects, but if they come with bankable projects, it is the banks who will be searching for you, and it will not be you who will have to be begging banks. So this is the system that is not well structured because quite often there is the businesses don't have sufficient reporting to show banks that their projects are really bankable in order to get lending with good flash cash flow and without any collateral. So we need to have a transparent structure, and we are trying to show them that in the long run, this is going to be much more beneficial for them than to be in the great sector of the economy. Because they're getting access to all those international tools, to international opportunities, and in that way we will really strike the right balance between demand and supply. We will balance them, and then businesses will be able to get loans and the banks will get good clients with the risk reduced to the extent possible. Well, thank you, Andrei. In fact, I can see that you have already answered the first question from our Q&A session, and I would say that your answer has been exhaustive. It was the answer to the question about the mechanisms for having some insurance for businesses against the risks of the war. And there is another question in the chat. So how do you assess the idea of creating the Development Bank of Ukraine following the Polish BGK or other similar large European national development banks? Could this well, their sample. Could this solve the problems that we have with bank lending? And Praveen has mentioned our National Development Institution, which is actually the development agency. So, how realistic would it be to create such an NDI or such a development bank in the current conditions? So, would you like to give any comments regarding the mandate of this NDI and what is expected? Praveen or Andrei, over to you. Okay, let me start. As a member of the supervisory board of this national development institution and the representative of the state on behalf of the Ministry of Economy. So it's really true that the National Development Institution was established at the beginning of this year. Before that, we used to have the Development Fund that was actually implementing the 579 program. It was just renamed and this NDI was created. But the funding increased, and the main mandate of this NDI, which is fixed in the law and in the draft strategies that is now in the making, is supporting SMEs, which means that our Ukrainian counterpart of the development agency. The strategy presupposes maximum involvement of international funding with well, we have KfW besides FRP and ONUR, and next, well, Germany has already allocated 140 million euros to support, and we are also working on capitalization of ONUR for them to have more opportunities to support business. And several weeks ago, the National Bank of Ukraine added guarantees of ONUR as the tool that could be used for collateral, and in this way, we actually are going to also develop NUR in this direction. And let me also add that at the moment, we mostly focus on developing energy support small, medium-sized projects, also the ones that we had, Energodim or Energy House for private homeowners associations for small households. But now we are also thinking about the programs from the government for large projects, because 579 limits to 250 million hryvnias for energy. But if we speak about construction of a large power plant, this amount is too small. So we would like to have a separate program that would work for such large projects. And generally, Nur, or this NDI is actually, or which I call Nur in Ukrainian, has the task to go through the EU pillar assessment within the next 2 years, and then our NDI will be able to be getting direct funding from the EU funds. Thank you, Andrei. So far, I can see one question in the chat, and I will try to rephrase it to shorten it. So the question is as follows. In the opinion of some experts and business representatives, the interest rates for credits and deposits in Ukraine very high. And after the EU accession, after we entered the banking financial market in general, there could be a shock because the competition will increase, the rates will go down. I've heard that deposit rates in the EU in many banks are negative ones, and in Ukraine, we have war, we have resources, and financial resources very expensive. So this is the factor that impedes economic growth in the country. I think that Praveen has partially covered this question, talking about the interest rates, but still, let us get back to this question. And let us think what will happen after Ukraine becomes a member of the EU. Maybe this is not going to happen today or tomorrow, but the pace of our accessing the EU is quite good. So, what will be the form of this integration, and what can we possibly expect from the point of view of interest rates after that happens? Well, let me start commenting, and my colleagues maybe will follow up. So let's start with saying that the cost of hryvnia resources will anyway be predetermined by the cost of hryvnia and the revenues expected for hryvnia. So before we move to euro as the national currency, and this will be a separate decision, which may not coincide in time with our accession to the EU. So until this moment in time, we will anyway focus on hryvnia and the inflation rate 5%, which is the standard one. So the cost of the resources will depend on how quickly we go through this period. And at the moment, the rates of the National Bank are set in that way to keep hryvnia attractive and to increase the level of trust in hryvnia and not to have high inflation. And that's what we take into account when we speak about the cost of credits. But if we have a look at the key interest rate and the cost of resources, we don't see any access because the accounting rate is 15, but the interest rates are a little bit higher than 15 on average. So it depends on the risks and some other factors, but in general, that corresponds well to our price conditions and our inflation trends. When in general will be heading towards the EU, definitely there will be something that will be helpful for us. First of all, this is improvement of the investment climate. Many European legislative norms aim to create same rules of the game, and in order to create a unified space, single space for business management. So this will additionally decrease activity risks and the threats between the credit and deposit rates. The differences. Why does the national bank follow the monetary policy? Because we want to curb inflation. So that is my answer. And I think that there are definitely some prospects for the reduction of both rates in the midterm horizon of our forecast.
такі
on condition we comply with the policy, I think that we will get back to the rates that we used to have in 2021, when you could get loans at the interest rate of about 10%. That is the level which would be much better for businesses and for residents. If we are talking about mortgage, it becomes possible at such rate. And then we will see. We will hope for the better, and we will hope that this trend will be only improving in the future. Yes, it's really true. We have to hope for the better. All the more that today we have heard that in spite of the current low loan to GDP ratio, anyway, the government, our international partners, focusing on accelerating the pace of lending for our companies to be able to use banks as the resource that they would need for their development. We still have just 1 minute, and I can see Andrei Talupa's hand, so I would give the floor to Andrei, and then we will do the wrap up of our today's event. So, Andrei, over to you. Yes, let me pass the ball with this cost of insurance and credits. And we can see that the cost is going down gradually. The inflation rate is high and the accounting rate is high, therefore crediting cannot be provided at a low interest rate. But we have heard it many a time that banks do not give any loans in frontline areas. But after we refocused, reshifted our 579, we can state that last year almost 1/3 of this portfolio was the money for frontline areas. And let me remind you that the percentage, the interest rate there is actually 1%. So it's almost free of charge loans for recovery and restoration of business in frontline areas, because we covered this difference. And last year, about 30 billion hryvnias were issued under that program, and that is a good example showing that there is nothing impossible, even in times of hostilities, but we need to have a lot of systemic and consistent work behind it, done by all of us together, and then the success will be there. All right, Parveen, any words as a conclusion? I'm just grateful to you for encouraging the interest in this topic, and I'm also grateful to all our partners because uh, though we are performing a little bit different tasks, but we're trying to find a language in common to really develop the state, to not just stabilize, but to develop the
Для
economy in the
нас
state.
підтримка
Natalia,
бізнесу
for us,
це
business
більш средства банку.
support is the
Ті
strategic
мікро,
task of our
малий і
bank, be
середній
it
та великий
SMEs, be it large
корпоративні.
corporations. So
Ми
we would
запрошуємо
invite
всіх до
everyone
нашого
to our
банку для
bank.
того, щоб
Please
скористатися
use
такими
all the
можливостями,
opportunities that we
які
provide
пропонуємо.
to you.
Дякую.
Thank you. Thank you.
Всім
Thanks a
нашим
lot to all our
учасникам
today's
сьогодні.
participants. Let me
Закликаю всіх
encourage
наших
all our participants and
слухачів
all our
підтримати
listeners
українську
to
армію,
support the Ukrainian
розвивати
army, to
український
develop
бізнес,
Ukrainian
тому що
business,
український
human
капітал є
capital,
наш
and
Україна
Ukraine as a
заслуговує
state
того
in
всім
general. Thanks a
гарного
lot, and thank you for
сьогодні.
your participation in our today's session. Thank you.
До побачення.
Дякую, до побачення.